Hello and welcome to the ADHD Artist Podcast, where we explore and celebrate the lives of artists with ADHD. Listen to interviews with all different types of artists with ADHD, where we talk about life, art, superpowers, and... Wait, what was I saying? Hosted by Sarah Guys, your fellow ADHD artist. Thanks for joining. Okay, well, welcome to the first episode of the podcast. As I said before, I'm Sarah. I was diagnosed with ADHD when I was in second grade. For those who aren't familiar with ADHD, basically it's a neurodevelopmental disorder characterized by inattention, impulsivity, and in some cases hyperactivity. I am not by any means an expert, but I've done my own research over the last decade or so and worked with lots of mental health professionals throughout. And honestly, there is so much information out there on ADHD that no wonder it's confusing and misunderstood. We'll talk more about what ADHD is and is not in a later episode. So for me, self-awareness about my ADHD has been really important, as well as having a box of tools and resources to draw from when my ADHD starts to get the best of me and cause problems. I've had some serious issues over the years with medications, anxiety, shame, and sometimes lashing out and hurting people I love. And throw being a freelance artist in there, and it's chaos. I'm a professional actor, but I do a ton of other things, some for money, some for the love of it, some just because why not? For years, I desperately wished I had more ADHD artist friends and outspoken role models. So here we are. I've created a podcast where you can hear stories of artists with ADHD talking about some of their challenges and superpowers. I use the word superpower a lot because I like it. We'll talk about techniques and strategies, experiences with medication, cool resources you may not have heard of. We'll talk about different art forms and why art is the most important thing. You will probably get some advice, but as a disclaimer, I want to say don't substitute that for medical advice. Regardless, I think we'll all learn a lot. So, Georgette Verdin is one of my favorite people in the world. And as soon as I realized I was going to do this podcast, I knew that she was going to have to be the first guest on the show. She is a really great role model, really talented director, and just a really fun person to be around, even if it has to be virtual. Georgette is a Chicago-based director, theater and speech educator, and arts integration specialist. She is also the proud managing artistic director of Interrobang Theater Project, a critically acclaimed storefront theater in Chicago, known for its gutsy productions tackling socially relevant topics. In 2019, Interrobang was honored with the prestigious Broadway in Chicago Emerging Theater Award. I should mention that I am also an ensemble member with Interrobang Theater Project, and that's how Georgette and I met each other back in 2014. Georgette has taught kindergarten through college in her hometown of New Orleans, as well as Chicago, where she has resided since 2009. She was the founding theater teacher at Polaris Charter Academy, an expeditionary learning school in Chicago's West Humboldt Park neighborhood, where she taught full-time for 8 years. Select directing credits include Tribes by Nina Rain, Jeff Awards recommended productions of Out of Love, U.S. premiere by Eleanor Cook, Grace and Recent Tragic Events by Craig Wright, and Time Stands Still by Donald Margulies, as well as the 2013 and 2016 Yale Drama Series winners Still by Jen Silverman and Utility by Emily Schwend. Georgette has also worked with Goodman Theater, Looking Glass Theater, Facility, and Chicago Dramatists, among others. Georgette holds a Bachelor of Arts in Theater Performance from McNeese State University in Lake Charles, Louisiana, and a Master in Directing from the Chicago College of Performing Arts at Roosevelt University. I also wanted to mention that Zoe Verdin is Georgette's wife, and also one of my other very good friends, and we'll definitely talk about her a little bit in this episode. Okay, let's get to the interview. Hello, we are officially recording, and I am here with one of my best friends and fellow ADHD artist, Georgette Verdin. Hi, Georgette.
Hi, Sarah.
Hi. I would love to start kind of just at the beginning and get a little of your history. Like, do you remember when you were diagnosed and what exactly you were diagnosed with?
Yeah, I was diagnosed in 2012. And I don't remember if I was diagnosed with a specific type of ADHD. I would say I'm probably more the inattentive, although there are times when not so much hyperactivity, but definitely the impulsive behavior is something that I've struggled
like
with.
fidgeting and stuff like that.
Yes.
Rehearsals are so
Yeah.
fun with the fidgeting.
I know.
Like, gotta have something, get her a fidget spinner or something. Come on.
That's right. Yeah. I've had a few of those.
So cool. So can you talk a little bit about what your relationship is with art?
Sure. I am a director, so I direct plays. And, you know, which I think is a really great avenue and creative outlet for me. It feels like it really fits within the ADHD, I think primarily because it's both structured and also constantly offers like new stimuli. So one of the things that's very hard for me is doing the same thing over and over and over again. Those types of jobs or situations are really not good for me. And, you know, with directing, there are similarities from project to project, you know, rehearsal and tech and all of that. But within that structure, there's a lot that is different from project to project. And of course, you're working on different stories, you're working with different people, you're collaborating with different designers. And so that sort of ability to constantly have new stimuli within a structure that I've become very comfortable with is sort of a really perfect balance for me.
I'm dying to know the answer to this question that kind of leads into it. What does it feel like to make art?
It's a great question. For me, it feels like I'm most in touch with my humanity when I'm making art. And also, I think this is part of having that sort of ADHD brain where you're constantly inundated with thoughts and things are sort of going 100 miles an hour, you know, all the time. And you're constantly being pulled in by new stimuli and looking for that stimuli when you're not being intentional. And so I think that art for me is a very intentional act, and it requires me to like slow down, and it requires me to check in with myself, and it requires me to sort of get quiet and get in touch with my instincts and my my gut. And yeah, so to me, it feels like I'm never more alive and never more connected with the people around me than when I'm like in a rehearsal room or I'm in the process of creating something.
Yeah. I love what you say about like it forces you to slow down and check in with yourself and be part of humanity. So then when you are directing and I would say you're a very well-established director here in Chicago and other places.
Well, thank you, Sarah.
You absolutely are. And so when you are making art, directing in particular, what are some of the challenges that you face, whether it's in a rehearsal room or some of the organizational tasks?
I mean, for me, it can be very challenging to work months in advance. You know, when I'm in a rehearsal room, it's a little bit easier because I'm just dealing with what's coming at me and I'm working off of the energy that people are giving me. And I find that very gratifying and very exciting. When I'm at home at my desk and I'm working on something that isn't going to be coming to fruition for 6 months from now, sometimes that can feel a little abstract to me. It doesn't have the same instant gratification attached to it. So it can be challenging. Sometimes I'll want to pivot and work on something that I can feel a little more instant gratification on. And, you know, and yet at the same time, doing that foundation work and that prep work for a play is critical. And you really have to be able to set yourself up for success and set up the people that you're working with for success by knowing what you're doing and having done the research and setting that foundation. So that can be challenging for me because it doesn't always feel fun. I always enjoy research once I have forced myself to get into it. It's something that I really appreciate, but sometimes just the act of starting can be very challenging.
I feel that.
Yes.
You just gotta jump in.
That's right.
So then, if those are some of the challenges that you find with directing, do you feel like with art and directing in particular that ADHD can actually be a superpower?
Yes. I think there's a common misconception that people with ADHD can't focus on anything ever. Mm-hmm. And that's really not true. It's that we have a very difficult time focusing on things we don't care about.
Yep.
And when we find those things, when we plug into what we're really passionate about, it can be really hard to drag us away from that. So I think in actuality, we get very passionate. We throw our whole weight behind things that we're passionate about. We give wholeheartedly to those things. And I think that's a superpower. We tend to, when we care about something, we will go to the ends of the earth to complete it. And we often are very passionate people.
I completely agree. I feel like when I tune into something I care about, like you said, I will go to the ends of the earth to get it done. And there's,
that's right.
Yeah. Do you experience what they call hyper focus?
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
When do you most experience that?
I think when I'm starting to build a momentum, and sometimes that can be in my research work when I'm cluing into things that are really exciting, when it feels like the pieces of the puzzle are coming together. It can also happen in the rehearsal room where I'm just so hyper focused on what we're doing that when I get outside of the rehearsal room, it can be really challenging to pull myself out of that world and to focus on things like paying my bills or cleaning my bedroom or whatever else the case may be. And I just tend to love the feeling of being fully immersed in something, and that can be really beautiful and really productive. And sometimes it can be detrimental to other aspects of your life,
Well, that is a perfect lead into my next question, which is, how has your ADHD affected your relationships? I mean, I know like you and Zoe have talked about it a lot. Has that affected other relationships? Do you feel like it's your ADHD or the art or both?
Yeah, it's interesting. Sometimes I do have to remind myself to be an active listener. And sometimes I will find myself not being as present as I would like with people. I think I've gotten better about that as I've gotten older and as I've learned to do more meditation and just sort of and focus myself more. But sometimes it can be challenging, and sometimes I come across a type of person that is particularly challenging for me. Like for some reason, I don't find them interesting or intriguing at all. And it requires an incredible amount of like willpower to stay present with that personality and give them my full attention, which can really wipe me out, And I think as an artistic director and as the face of a company, there are a lot of people who are vying for my attention at any one time. And I want to be giving of myself to them. And I'm also an introvert who can pose as an extrovert. And
I feel you there.
Yes. And so I can do it and I can give myself to people, but a lot of times I find that when I'm done, I'm very drained or worn out. And sometimes that means that because I'm giving myself to strangers or young artists or different people, whatever the case may be, sometimes it also means that the people who are closest to me there's not as much left over for them. And so I do have to be kind of conscious about that and about how much of myself I'm giving away so that there's enough of me to go around.
What does it look like when you talk about being worn out and drained, where you've given your all, you've gone to the ends of the earth, and then you come home, and what does that look like for you?
It looks like a train wreck.
Do we need to get Zoe in here to explain?
Well, it's funny because Zoe takes the brunt of it, quite honestly, and she is a saint. But it looks like me getting very cranky, actually. And so a lot of times it's just like I'm go, go, go. And then the second that I don't have that pressure to be the face anymore or the life of the party anymore, I just kind of fall apart, and I'm moody and I'm cranky and I'm tired. And, I kind of revert to like my 3-year-old self. Which is not something I'm proud of, but it is the truth. And I have to be careful about that because, that's not particularly fair to my partner. But yeah, I mean, for me, it really does manifest in a bit of a tantrum, and I get just really cranky.
I'm curious from the outside, what it looks like is you and Zoe have such amazing communication between the two of you. And I know that you've worked on that for years. Are there any tools that the two of you use when you're having a bad day, or plans that you've come up with together?
Yeah, I mean, Zoe's great because she's in all of the areas where I'm weakest. She's quite strong, which so I really feel like there's a balance there. And she's been very supportive. She was very supportive of my getting diagnosed. And that's been really great because it allows me to not sort of exist in shame all the time. And so sometimes, Zoe will point out that I'm sort of in ADHD mode before I'll even recognize it. And so a lot of times she'll be able to suggest things that she knows works. And she's also, my teacher friends will know what I mean by this, but I call her my accommodations because she, when I'm having a particularly hard time, when I'm not able to slow myself down, she'll just like get her computer out and, invite me to kind of talk at her, and she'll just type it all out. And I'm also very much a verbal processor. So it really allows me to, all of those things that are swimming in my head, it just allows me to get them out and not have to worry about prioritizing them right away or making sense of them right away. And then she and I will oftentimes sit together and we'll talk about the things that make the most sense in terms of what I should prioritize and what my 80-20 is, what is going to sort of lower my anxiety the most. So we've kind of come up with a system and a way for sort of managing things when I'm, at the height of an anxious period or when I'm feeling sort of really impulsive. So she has really been integral in me figuring out how to manage this, on a daily basis.
Yeah, it seems like over the years, you've really developed a good support system, which is something that I always recommend. I mean, really for anyone moving to a new city, like anyone who has any mental health issues, behavioral health, that kind of thing, like build yourself a support system. That doesn't always look like a partner. It could be a good therapist. It could be, a friend to check in. Do you agree that?
Well, it's really not, absolutely. And it's really nice, just to have you inside of the same company to talk to. And because I think that, ADHD is one of those things that's very misunderstood as a disorder. And there's a lot of stigma around it. And when I was first diagnosed, I remember being like really devastated by it. I mean, I'd for years joked about it, about the fact and sort of suspected that I had ADHD. But when I was preparing to go to start my first semester of grad school for directing. And I was also managing, having a full load of teaching. And I remember, Zoe and I sitting down and creating a schedule for me of having to do all of the work that I was supposed to have done on the first day of class. And it was such a rigid schedule that I couldn't stick to it. And I was really in panic mode about that. And that's when it made me realize that the way that I had kind of negotiated my life up until that point was like, I give myself a lot of room for flexibility and switching things around. I always get stuff done, but I need flexibility, and I need the ability to, move the blocks around in a way that feels interesting to me. And with all of the work that I had in front of me, there was just no room for that. And so that's when I started researching ADHD, and that's when I was like, wow, I don't just have ADHD. I'm like the textbook case of ADHD, and then it made me feel like, wow, am I anything other than ADHD? Because everything that I thought was unique to my personality that made me who I was felt like it was just a symptom of this disorder. And I really felt like I was kind of losing my sense of self and losing my identity in that. And that took a while for me to get over. But one of the things that was really great was having Zoe sort of remind me that wasn't true, and that I was, not that I was oversimplifying my personality and the things that made me special. And so, yeah, I think that having that support system is really important, and having people that you can openly talk about the challenges and the benefits of having ADHD is really crucial. It's important that you aren't, that you don't allow yourself to go into a shame spiral about it, and sort of feed into the stigma of it. You have to figure out, okay, here are my limitations, and how do I work within those limitations? And, it's just like anything else.
I love that. The idea of setting what your limitations are and working within that. It doesn't mean that those limitations, that you can't expand that, but it means let's look at how we are. Let's look at who we are and find a way to be okay with it and make things like work for us.
Especially as women, I think one of the things that I learned when I was doing that research back in 2012 that led me into my diagnosis was learning that many women go undiagnosed, because in young boys, it tends to manifest in that hyperactive way. So it tends to get people's attentions earlier on. And young women often go undiagnosed because we tend to not have that hyperactivity, and we tend to be better at finding coping mechanisms and finding ways around. So all throughout, my schooling, I maintained really good grades. I procrastinated a lot, and I was in duress a lot because I wasn't managing my time well. But at the end of the day, I always delivered. And that's not the same often for boys. A lot of times they struggle to find those coping mechanisms. So unfortunately, we just aren't as good at diagnosing young girls and young women.
Which is very tricky, because I think there's a lot of shame around thinking, well, am I just stupid? Like, why can't I do this? Is it because I'm too dumb? Should I give up on this because I'm never going to get there? I think it can be really tricky. And as Brene Brown talks about, shame in a petri dish only needs two things to grow, and that is secrecy and silence.
Yes.
And
so true.
Why do you feel like there's this shame around it, as artists in particular?
Yeah, it's so true. I mean, it's interesting. I think for me, one of the things that I've had to come up against a lot is, especially as someone who, I do think that that I've been successful in my life. And a lot of times I'm met with, when I say that I have ADHD with someone who doesn't understand it, they don't think it's possible because I've had success, because I have a undergraduate degree. I went to grad school. I run a company. I freelance, I'm doing the things that I want to be doing. And I think there is this idea that people with ADHD just can't be successful. And so sometimes that stops me from telling people, because I don't want to have to convince them that I actually do have ADHD. That gets very exhausting to have to constantly, not have people accept that.
Sometimes when I see a role model or a celebrity that I want to look up to, part of the issue is I start to go like, oh, well, I could never be like them because they don't have ADHD. Or I could never, they think in this way and that's why they're successful, and I don't think that's the case. I think what it ends up being is a self-fulfilling prophecy. Is like, we don't believe we can do it because we don't see that it's possible. And so we just give up.
Yeah, that's so true. I mean, I think those of us with ADHD, we don't even know who's out there, how many celebrities that might actually have ADHD. And we know that individuals who have ADHD are drawn to the arts and to creative expression because of the freedom it allows us, because of the ways that it allows us to sort of, follow our impulses, and follow our curiosities, but it's just no one's given us permission to talk about that. And I think that's really important, and a really important thing that you're allowing people to do is just to sort of not only talk about it, but talk about it in a way that is, not shaming and not framed like what's wrong. Let's talk about what's wrong with us, but many of us without ADHD probably wouldn't be creatives.
Honestly, yeah. We have to do that. I've tried to do so many other things. I'm like, I just don't have the attention span for it. And so I've, had to make it work. I really wish that something like this, where ADHD artists in particular can connect, was something that existed when I was younger. Like when I was going to college, when I first graduated.
Well, think about how long it's taken you to develop the tools to successfully navigate the world. Yeah. I mean, it's taken me years. It's taken me decades to develop tools that allow me to sort of be conscious of the challenges I'm up against and then to successfully overcome those, But I think if that was something that were being talked about when I was in middle school or high school or, even college, I wouldn't have had to be in panic mode so often, because I spent a lot of those early years panicking because I always wanted to do well. I always loved learning, but I didn't always know how to set myself up for success.
Yeah. What advice do you have for someone with ADHD who is an aspiring artist but may be struggling?
I think the biggest thing is not to allow yourself to feel shame about it, because whenever you feel shame, it keeps you from reaching out to people. It keeps you from finding community. It keeps you from finding resources and asking for help. And I think that we all have to sort of take responsibility for changing the public narrative on ADHD.
Yeah, I completely agree.
Yeah.
What kinds of, you've already mentioned this a little bit, but what kinds of tools have you personally used that have helped with that? I know you mentioned meditation.
Yes, meditation has been really great, especially during the time of Corona. Meditation has really allowed me to slow down. And it also just allows me to be really compassionate with myself. There was a question that you sent me that I thought was like so brilliant. And I think it was something like, how do you deal with bad days? I think it's really important when you have ADHD, because there are cycles of up and down. There are cycles of productivity. There are times when it's incredibly difficult to motivate yourself. And so I think the more things that you can do to sort of get in touch with self-compassion, the better off that you're going to be. And I've gotten really pretty good at recognizing, okay, today is just a day where I'm not going to be all that productive, or I'm not going to be that effective. And it does me no good to beat myself up about it, because probably tomorrow I'm going to be 3 or 4 times as effective as anyone else, and that's kind of the cycle that you go through. Sometimes I'm incredibly productive and I'm just like doing so many things. And then other times I just don't have it in me and I can't force myself to do what I need to do. So meditation is a big one.
What kind of meditation? Do you do mindfulness? Do you prefer like silence or a guided meditation?
So I do a combination of both. Sometimes I do guided meditations, but lately I've been wanting to do more silent meditation. And so sometimes I use the app Insight Timer, and I've been doing like a 30-minute meditation in the morning. And
that's hard,
which is hard, which is incredibly hard. And
for 30 minutes of sitting still with ADHD.
Yeah, very, very hard, especially if I wake up with a lot of anxiety. Like sometimes so like the idea of sitting down to meditate is just so difficult. But the more I do it, the easier it is. And the more I sort of buy into, or the more I sort of recognize like how beneficial it is for the rest of my day, and the ways in which it allows me to keep my anxiety at a manageable level throughout the day. So that's been really great. I also had a friend who's a painter who recently taught me about the Pomodoro technique. The basics are that you set a timer for 25 minutes and you sort of do a deep dive into whatever task you have for 25 minutes. And then at the end of that 25 minutes, the timer goes off, and then you have a 5-minute break where you can do whatever you want. And I found that that's just so helpful. I mean, because sometimes I'm sitting down and I'm doing something that is going to take me hours. I'm doing something like bank notes for Interrobang, where I'm having to like work in a spreadsheet, and it's just so dull. And breaking it up into 25-minute sections just really helps me to not feel like I want to shoot myself in the foot. It just really makes it a lot more manageable. So, on my best days, I will block out my entire day in 25-minute sections. And, it's funny because another thing that I know and that the research tells us, right, is that writing things out, giving yourself a schedule for the day is really beneficial and helps to keep you on track. And yet it is one of the hardest things to get.
It's so hard.
It's so hard. I mean, it's so hard. And that's the thing that's interesting, I think, about ADHD, is that the sort of the paradox of needing structure so badly and also hating it. Yeah. Right? Like hating it, because it feels like there's like no opportunity for spontaneity. There's going to be no joy. There's no, what can happen once I've like written my entire day onto a scheduled piece, onto a piece of paper. And yet we need that structure. We need it so badly. And so sometimes I really fight myself because I just don't want to plan my day. I just don't want to. I want the ability to just live freely, and yet oftentimes when I give into that feeling, those are some of my hardest days. I also have grandiose ideas about what I can accomplish in any one given day. I don't know if it's the same for you, but like Absolutely. In my mind, it's like a giant scroll of things that I can just like keep, and when I actually put it on paper, it forces me to recognize like my limitations. And oftentimes I'm like, wow, I can only do 3 things today. That sucks. And many times I don't even get those 3 things accomplished. And because it's like, wow, I did 1.5 things today, or I did 2 things today, But so scheduling things out, the Pomodoro technique is something that I highly recommend, because that 25 minutes of focus feels manageable. And whenever I'm inside of a task and I'm like, oh, I just want to look at my phone, I just want to get on social media, knowing that there's a very finite amount of time is soothing to me. And I know that I can get through 25 minutes of focus. And then I get a reward afterwards, which, we all know we love rewards.
Is it chocolate? Because mine is always chocolate.
Absolutely. It's chocolate. I usually, more often than not, use my 5 minutes to go to the kitchen and get a snack.
Yeah, of course. So then I just have one last question, which is, we are currently in quarantine, and the future is uncertain of theater, but what projects can we support you on? So the project that is probably coming up the soonest that I can talk about is our production of Sexbot, which is going to be produced by Interrobang, and we're currently in developments for that. You're in it, which is awesome. And it's a play that uses sex bots as a lens to explore our relationship to technology. It's a particularly exciting project because it's the first time that we, as a company, are developing something together with our ensemble. So it feels like a really special project. It's also, the playwright of that project is my good friend Brandon, who I met when I first moved to Chicago back in 2009, which is crazy. So that's been really rewarding to work with him. And to figure out how we do new play development as an artistic company is really exciting. So I hope that everyone listening will get an opportunity to come and check Sexbot out. Yeah, hopefully we'll be able to leave our houses and
theater
will live on.
Fingers crossed. Fingers crossed.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, thank you. I cannot thank you enough for coming on
fun.
And hanging out with us. It's just a real treat to get to know you even better. I mean, you're already one of my best friends. Yeah. But I feel like having this kind of solidarity is really important to me right now. And
it is. Really, and thank you, because I think it's a really courageous thing that you're undertaking. And I think it's really important and will be really meaningful for a lot of people. So that is just, thank you for letting me be a part of that.
Of course.
Yeah.
All right, girl.
Love you. Love. Mwah. Take care.
And that's it for today for the ADHD Artist Podcast. This podcast was produced by me, Sarah Guys. Original music composed by Christopher Aaron Narr. You can find more of his work at www.christopheraaronnar.com. Narr is spelled Knarr. Podcast artwork by Joseph Ramsky. For any inquiries, you can contact him directly at jramski3@gmail.com. Thanks for tuning in, and don't forget to hit subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts. You can also follow us on Instagram at the ADHD Artist Pod.